Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here right before Christmas. The Monday before Christmas as far as allpointstv.com is concerned, and the Saturday before Christmas as far as those listeners at 92.1, our favorite radio station, WFOV. And they're doing such an excellent job over there. They're putting pressure on us over here, John, in the studio, because we've got to catch up with what they're doing over there. They're doing an excellent job, have some great programs there. And as I said before, I find myself tuning in to the alternative media, and I do consider our network here at allpointstv.com to be an alternative media, and also 92.1 to be along that same line. We are not what you would call mainstream, but what the program that we're doing is offering a mainstream service, and I'm really happy to be a part of the network that both channels are dealing with. I think we are a pretty good team. And John, I want to commend you for the job that you're doing as far as the part that you add to the program. You're not on camera here as far as allpointstv.com is concerned, and they hear your voice on 92.1, but without your input, I don't think it will be the program that it is, and I definitely appreciate your input. That being said, I wanted to talk about a couple of things here today. One of the things I want to talk about, along with the things that are happening right now with the FBI and the probing of the so-called collusion issue that was supposed to be between Russia and the Trump administration. I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about the tax issue, since Washington's up here celebrating. John, they're celebrating giving us back our money. You know, it's like the thieves. A guy puts a gun to your nose and tells you to get your hands up, and reaches in your pocket and grabs your money, and then he decides, maybe through some pangs of guilt, to return some of your money, but not all of which you took. And you're supposed to applaud the fact that some of the money that was stolen from you is being returned. and that's what it amounts to. I mean, we're not voluntarily sending out money to the government in Washington, and we certainly don't want to be paying for the kind of government we're getting out of these jokesters up there in the nation's capital. But you know, it goes with the territory now that we have the passage of the 16th Amendment that was passed in 1913. You may not be aware of it, but they could not constitutionally tax income in this country on the federal level until 1913 with the passage of the 16th Amendment. So I look at these guys and these ladies that are in Washington right now, and they're up there celebrating, and they've done some great things here in terms of, and guess what they call it? They don't call it now. I don't know if you notice this or not. They don't call this a tax decrease. And I'll tell you why they don't call it that in a minute, because I hate to break your bubble, but they never reduce taxes in this country. Now, I noticed in the paper, they said that those persons that are making less than $25,000 a year, they will get, can we get a drum roll here? They will get back $60 based upon this tax break that we're bragging about. You'll get $60 back. And can you write this down, because hallelujah, happy days are here again. And if you are making between, let's see if I can remember the numbers, if you are making between $49,000 and $87,000, you'll get back about $900. So that would buy what? And if you're making between $733,000, let's say above $733,000, then you will get a tax break of $51,000. Now, I noticed everybody was up here talking about how the tax break that's given is designed to give the tax break to the rich. And that's not even the issue. But that's what people that do not understand what's going on with these so-called tax decreases, that's how they see it. They see it as the rich are getting more money back than the poor are getting back. Therefore, the discussion right now in Washington is that it's an unfair tax break, because look at how much money they're getting of those that are the fat cats, making upwards of $733,000. And is that fair? No, it's not fair. Here's paying tax is not fair either. And I want to talk about the fairness of that, because that's not where the unfairness is. We'll talk about that in just a minute.
Here's a list. I wish I known this was going to be the topic today, because I would have put it up for, saved it for us to use. Here's the list of the average American taxpayers pay, the taxes. There's a property tax, sales tax, state income tax, marriage license fees, local school tax, vehicle registration tax, business permit fees, estate tax, waste management tax, cigarette tax, court fees, dog license tax, driver's license fees, garbage tax, gasoline tax, gun ownership fees, gift tax, Social Security taxes, unemployment taxes, fishing license fees, highway toll fees, hotel tax, hunting license fees. It goes on. Import taxes, health insurance tax, inheritance tax, inspection fees, IRS interest and penalty, charge, library card fees, license plate fees, liquor tax, luxury tax, Medicare tax, parking meter fees, passport fees, biodiesel fuel tax, air transportation tax, professional vehicle fees, recreational vehicle tax, self-employment tax, sewer and water tax, service charge taxes, sports stadium taxes, state park entrance fees, tanning tax, 911 service tax, universal fees, tire tax, and the federal income tax. So, is that enough? And they always say, well, in Europe they tax higher. Actually, if you had all these taxes, I don't see how.
Yeah, I'm just glad they left enough in our check so we can pay our rent. So they're so good to us in terms of their taxation policies in this country. They at least let us have something to put over a roof over our heads. But in terms of what we allowed to save, that is another issue. They're so good to us as tax agents. It's really interesting how they framed this latest tax break. I was reading in the paper where they said, and I want you to always look at the terms that they employ when they are explaining to us how good they are as our masters, because that's who they are. This money is being collected under no less stressful circumstances as a person on the street who holds a gun under your nose and tells you get your hands up and take your money out of your pocket by force. And it doesn't look to be the same thing, but it is the same thing. It's just that one is using force illegally and the other one is using force legally. Both of them are gangsters. People do not have a right to your money, a moral right to your money. That which you have earned through the sweat of your own brow is your money. Can you write that down? Let's understand that if you are working and somebody else is receiving the money that you're working for, that is called enslavement. And just because they don't take the whole 9 yards of the income, which will remind you of slavery, it doesn't mean that that's not it, because you can keep some at their beck and call and because of their goodwill. And if they took the whole thing, then you'll be able to recognize what's going on. So just enough is returned back to you to keep you from objecting to what's going on here. But I noticed this past during this week, when they had the tax cut, quote unquote, they didn't call it a tax cut because that's not what it is. I have to tell you something. Government never cuts taxes, because government never cuts its appropriations of its own costs. So taxes are never cut in this country, and that's not what they did this last time. And I want you to look at the words that they use. Go back and look at the news reports. They said that this was, do we have the drums in here? This was a tax overhaul. So how many of you have seen, when you go down, let's say in this city here, Miller Road, you see those trucks over there right past the I-75 corridor, that area over there. You see the U-Haul in that area? U-Haul, those trucks over there. So when they say the tax overhaul, which is what they call this tax bill, called it a tax overhaul. They didn't call it a tax decrease. See, just because you're getting $60 more in your check, those of you who are making $25,000 or less a year, and those who are making between $49,000 and 87, I think it is, thousand, somewhere around 86, 87,000, you're going to get back $900 a year. And those of you making more than $733,000, you're going to get back $900 more a year. But they never said that there is a reduction in taxes. They call it a tax overhaul. So when you're hauling something like U-Haul, the question is, if you are overhauling something, where are you hauling it over to? Can we ask that question? Can we ask a question here? That if you are overhauling taxes, where are you hauling the taxes over to? And who is on the other side of that hauling of the taxes? Who is on the other side of it? Okay, we're going to talk about that for a second. Because you think that these people in Washington are going to reduce the amount of money that they are collecting and give some of the money back to you out of what they are receiving in Washington, you can have a nice day, but that ain't what's going on. Government never reduces taxes. So you didn't read the fine print because you were so happy to read that if you're making less than $25,000, if you're making $25,000 or less, you will get a grand total. Where are those drums now? I gotta have a drum roll here. You're getting $60 back. So your check will show that you're getting $60 back. So how much is that during the course of the year per check? You're getting paid every 2 weeks. If you are the average person, your income comes in twice a month. And I can tell when your checks come in because I go over there to send money abroad to some of the people that I have in school over there. I have a line I have to deal with on the first of the month because I know that in that time period, everyone has received their residuals after they've taken out their slice of it, and people are now trying to mail off some of the money to help other person with their lifestyle and their quality of life, and so therefore they're in the line sending money to those who are in desperate straits because what's the amount of money in their checks? So those that have a little bit more to spare after they have paid all of the taxes that John was reading off, then you send some of it to some other folks who are not as well off as you are, and that's why that line is so long. So I understand that, and I'm in that line also every month because I send money overseas to a couple of students that I'm trying to put through in the third world. But they didn't say that there was a tax decrease. And so I give them credit for their honesty. But you see, what they do is that they do not think that person understand economic language, and they do not think that person interrogate the language they use. And so they said tax overhaul, and we're not supposed to interrogate that. What does that mean? Or when they say, for example, that when they print money, when they counterfeit the currency, which is what they do when they begin to put more dollars out here, and it's a counterfeiting of the currency that therefore weakens all the currency already in existence by them creating currency out of thin air.
By the way, you want to add too, the Constitution does not give the government the right to make paper money.
Yes.
It's only coins. That's the only way it's supposed to go.
Congress is given the right in Article 1, Section 8, the right to coin specie. And specie would be either gold or silver. That is a metallic money is money. You cannot print money on a printing press. Can we all agree on that? Money cannot be printed. So that currency that is passing for money, if you notice that they don't put money on the currency, they call it legal tender. And they have these nice sounding words, legal tender, which means that you're not supposed to see that the government has a gun behind the words. Because if any proprietor that you go to and say that this is what I'm paying for this product, I'm giving you some paper with some pictures on it for a product that has value, and if the proprietor says he's not going to accept that because he knows the paper doesn't have value, then that person is going to jail. So it's legal tender, all right. The government has a gun in back of it, and he will take it or go to jail. That's what that means. I mean, they have some language now. And if they don't want you to follow what they're saying, they use words like tax overhaul. Now, you're not supposed to interrogate that or look at what that means. Or let's look at some of the other language they use. For example, they had this word, this new word that they had out for causing inflation. Inflation is when you have too many dollars chasing after too many goods. So the government, which doesn't produce anything, has this make-believe that they can in fact create wealth, because it doesn't create anything. See, government doesn't produce any product. So when it prints dollars, the idea is that government is in fact creating wealth. Yet the dollars that they're printing and putting out there, those dollars weaken all the dollars already in existence because it causes inflation, which means that the dollars that are being put into circulation above the dollars already in circulation, those dollars are worth more, are worth less, and they don't buy as much as they did before this inflationary printing of the currency was ongoing and is continuous.
Is that similar to Gresham's law about good money, bad money pushing out good? The more plentiful, I think it was when there was referencing to metal coin, money based upon, precious metal coinage. Silver, of course, would be inferior to gold. So too much silver would push out the gold. That's, I think, what it was connected to. But the principle is pretty much the same. Gresham's law.
Yeah, that's why they wanted. That's why they wanted to have a specie as the way in which we would operate the country's monetary system, because there's only a certain amount of quantity that is available of those metallic objects. Therefore, it limits what government can do, because if it doesn't have the money, M-O-N-E-Y, then it doesn't have the power to go out of control and become so humongous the government can do what it wants to do, because it builds itself into a monstrosity. So that was the intent of it, another way of having checks and balances of government through the monetary system. But they broke through that in 1913 with passage of the 16th Amendment. And that's a change in how the Constitution, was intended to operate. The Constitution didn't allow the federal government to have taxation of income in this country. The states could do it, but the federal government could not do it, because, and listen to this very carefully, the states did not give the federal government the authority to do that. That was a way for the states to control the federal government, because the federal government, as quiet as it's kept, it was a creation of the states. And all of you talking about states' rights and all that, that's the intent here. The states had the rights. The federal government was a child, and really the stepchild of the states. But we have changed that fundamentally right now, and we have a different relationship to the federal government than we had at the outset of this country. And the framers had something in mind, and we undermined it. And what we did is that we circumvented what they had in mind by adding to the process with the 16th Amendment in 1913. And then the same year, with the 17th Amendment, we in fact took away the state's right to send their own representatives to Congress. That's what the 17th Amendment does by allowing the popular election of the senators. And that was a very big mistake that was made back in 1913. We added 2 amendments in that year, and both of them were bad. And both of them have allowed the federal government to go out of control. So they were up here in Washington, and they all hugging. I saw President Trump. They had Tim Scott from South Carolina, bless his heart. He was the only, he was the only black person that they had as a showpiece in the Republican Party in terms of the senators. And of course, the Democrats had to go and get them a token also, because they had 90% of black people voting Democrat, and they didn't have one black person in the Senate since Obama became president. And so they had to have somebody over there because they looked pretty bad. Black people voting upwards of 90% of their vote in the Democratic Party and don't have a senator. And over here, black people only voting 10% or less in the Republican Party, and there's a senator from South Carolina. The state that was the first state to succeed from the Union has a black senator. How does that look in the Republican Party to the Democratic Party? You can't have that, right? So they ran in here and got Cory Booker and put him in there from Jersey. From Jersey. You say that like within the mafia, undertone. And so he's standing up there in front, and they all taking a bow, and they've done something fundamentally great. And all of that, going into 2018, they now can claim they had a major piece of legislation that was passed. And guess what? They're giving you some of your money back from Washington. That's what persons think. But did they use the word? I'm just asking now, and I don't want you to write this down because I want you to tell on me. But did they say that they have given a tax break back to the American people? Did they call it a tax break? Did you see that anywhere in the language? Did they actually use the word a tax break? Try to find that word somewhere in what they did when they in fact said those making less than $25,000 or less, those who are making $25,000 or less, $60 in your financial portfolio starting in February of 2018. So wonderful. And I don't know, I hope you will give these people a Christmas present and make sure that you send them something to show your appreciation. And from $49,000 to $87,000, you get $900. Above $733,000 and above, you're getting back $900 more than you were getting back before that. And everybody's talking about how the rich are getting more than anyone. And some people are talking the craziness of Donald Trump. The issue is Donald Trump was doing that in order for those in his category will get back, $900, $1,000, $2,000. Please. What is that to a billionaire to be getting back, $51,000 would be the amount that they're getting back at above $733,000. So what? That's chump change. That's walking around money. That's not anything. That's not even the issue. The issue is the overhaul. They haul the cost of the $60 for $25,000 and less, the $900 of those $49,000 to $86,000, $87,000. That's what they will get back in their check. And they say that this is an overhaul of the tax system that was in place prior to them making these changes. So I ask this question: where are they hauling this money over to? Well, here's the fine print. The fine print is that at the bottom of all of what they were reporting in the paper, they had down there in the fine print, because you went out and start celebrating, but in the fine print, after they talked about how much goes back in persons, checks and all of that, In the fine print, it said that it will add $1.4 trillion to the national debt. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Gomer Pyle, we're very surprised here. Because, you see, and we're going to take a break right now and from 92.1, and want to thank John for coming in at this point, and we are going to take a break for the next 4 minutes from that particular network, and when they come back, we will pick them up back at the point in which we left, and we'll get them back up to speed at that time when they come back in 4 minutes. We will continue here, though, at allpointstv.com, because the show must go on, even if it is, in fact, close to the Christmas holidays. We don't celebrate overly so before the holidays, but we are going to definitely be with our family. And we are saying in this country, don't know if you notice it or not, we are now saying Merry Christmas. And that is a different mood that we have in the country, because our overlords are now allowing us to say something other than Happy Holidays. You know, they had us saying for 8 years now, Happy Holidays. We were scared to say Merry Christmas. And now we are back to at least holding on to some of our traditions, because they're trying to change. They are trying to fundamentally transform this country. And I was at the bank before I came here, and there was so many Merry Christmas I couldn't get out the door. I guess people are just so glad to be able to say that all of a sudden, because that was ball. I don't know if you noticed or not. That was ball up.
I always said a Merry Christmas anyway. I didn't follow our esteemed rulers, example. I guess that's what makes me, I don't know, a bigot or something like that. I don't look to him or anybody else who sits in office as some kind of example I want to emulate. So,
you see, we have rulers here, and they want us to celebrate when they do things that look like they are being very kind-hearted, and they are in fact giving us a tax break, when there is never a tax break. They never give back the money they took. And so the fine print, as I was saying, was the bottom of that article that said that it will cost $1.4 trillion in terms of putting $60 more in one group's income earners checks, $900 for another income group, and $51,000 to $53,000 in another income group, and so on and so forth. It ain't coming out of their pocket. It ain't coming out of the Treasury. So where is that? So what do they mean by $1.4 trillion it will cost, add to the national debt, they said. So where was this overhaul taking place? Where are you hauling it off to? And here's the answer. We have to have, Jeopardy. Tick tock, tick tock. And they hauled it over, and please have a seat. They hauled it over to our children and our grandchildren. Because if you add $1.4 trillion to the national debt, that means what they did was they took the money to pay this out to those persons at the rate I just quoted a few minutes ago. They took that from the prosperity of the future, took it from the children. And if you understand our history in this country, that we had a revolution that we fought in 1776, taxation, and we are back now with 92.1. We're glad to have you back, and we're not very far from where we were when you left. And we're always glad when you come back to join us, because we understand that you could be doing other things with your time. So welcome back after your 4-minute hiatus. And we are very happy that you are back with us now on that particular network. 92.1 is a very important part of our programming here at allpointstv.com. We've had a war in this country that was over, supposedly, the issue of no taxation without representation. So at least you could say this about that time period, is that the taxation was at least taxing those persons who were here. But with what occurred in this tax overhaul this week, the tax overhaul was taxing those that are not even born yet. The $1.4 trillion that this tax overhaul is going to cost is a taxation to add to the national debt, and therefore that is being paid by those persons who will be the children and grandchildren who are being burdened with this debt down into the future.
They should have.
And therefore extracting the prosperity from the future in terms of this tax overhaul.
So I can't really criticize the idea of trying to allow people to keep more of their own money. But what's got to go along with this is got to go down. We got to go down the line and see if everything's being funded, should be funded. I mean, some things should just be cut out. I mean, you can't tell me every program is out there is so bloody necessary that it's worthy of taxing yourself into the future and generations like you're referring to. But we haven't done that. It's a half-baked attempt.
Yes.
That's what I think. It's a half-baked attempt.
I'm with you on that, John, in terms of the government should, in fact, restore people's income to them to whatever extent it takes place. Is always a good thing to do that. But that would require, and we didn't see any evidence of this going on, that would require them to make the necessary cuts to pay for it and live within its means based upon the tax overhaul. They're not doing that. You didn't read one thing about a program the government is now financing that would in fact be cut out or cut back so that the cost of the overhaul can be paid for by downsizing what government does. What these persons did was place the burden of that. In other words, they charged that to a credit card, and the credit card will be paid by those who are not even born yet or those who are not voting right now. And why do they do that? Because they cannot object to it. This was a political move. And people think it was a tax decrease. It was politics. And they're going to carry that into 2018 and use that as a way of running on the fact that people got more money in their check, but they are actually spending their children's money. That's what that $1.4 trillion means. And so how do you like them now? These people are really something when you understand what it is they're doing. The other thing, I think it ties into this discussion about the taxation, is that look what they're doing in terms of having McCabe. You know, Andrew McCabe was testifying. Was it yesterday or the day before yesterday that McCabe was testifying? Because we're taping a little bit later than we normally do. We're taping this program this time on Thursday, and we will be repeating this program on Saturday on WFOV. They had McCabe either yesterday or the day before yesterday. McCabe is the assistant director of the FBI, and they had him testifying behind closed doors. Now, you have to think about that in terms of here they called him to talk about why he and Peter Strzok were in McCabe's office, and listen to what they were saying in his office. This is not classified, so there's no reason to have this hearing behind closed doors. He was in the office saying that they did not believe that Donald Trump would win the presidency, but in case that he did do the impossible, they needed a backup plan in case that he won the election, despite their best estimate that would not in fact occur. They needed to have some insurance in case they were wrong. And they had Andrew McCabe, go behind closed doors and testify about that conversation, because all of us are aware of it now, that conversation went on. And they put it behind closed doors, which is to say that they were hiding from the American people McCabe's testimony, and hide because they want to hide the intent of that. And what was the intent? The intent is what you see Mueller doing. The intent is to overturn an election that they did not approve of, that they did not expect, they did not endorse, and they do not accept. This is some very, these people, look, this is totalitarianism on its face. These people are totalitarians. And they went up there and testified, McCabe went up there and testified as the assistant director of the FBI, went up there and testified behind closed doors because they don't want the American people to see this sewer. Because the American people will see that all of this celebratory thing, that all of this celebratory action that's going on right now, them celebrating their reducing their theft and all the things like this, if the American people can understand that, they would understand the country is exceptional because the American people are exceptional. They're not. This country is not exceptional because of the politician. These politicians just as corrupt and crooked as they are anywhere else. I was reading on the way to. I was listening on the way to the studio to the YouTube. There was a program that was airing on YouTube. That was re-airing on YouTube, and it showed that Maxine Waters, who doesn't even live in her district, she lives, her district is a very poor district in California, and she lives in a district that only has 12% of the people. You know, this is a black representative now, so she's living in a district that has 12% black. She couldn't win anything in that district because the people are too intelligent in that district to be voting for somebody who has Maxine Waters as a representative. They're not going to vote for her. So she goes over here to another district where she can scream and holler and emote, and people think they're getting representation, and then run over there in a district she doesn't even live in. And these people have voted her in. That woman's been in Washington 40 years. And they finally are calling her on her corruption. You ought to see what this woman has done. Now she's trying to holler that that's what government does. And he's going to be playing the race card, no question about that. And making it seem like it's racial. It's not racial, it's corruption. And they can do that probably about all the ones in the Congressional Negro Caucus, because they're not representing anybody, because black people do not require their representatives to represent them. They are requiring them to stand up there and holler racism. And they do that, and then go to look in their districts and see how those districts look. Go look at John Conyers, who had to retire. Go look in Detroit at where John Conyers has been representing since 1965. Go and look at his district. And then go to Maxine Waters' district that she doesn't live in, and then look at her district. Look at any of their districts. Doesn't matter which one you go to. Go look at Elijah Cummings' district, part of his district in Baltimore. Go look at Baltimore. Go look at where black folks are, and then look at where the Democratic Party is, because that's wherever black people are, that's where the Democratic Party is. And people get mad at me in this town because I'm surrounded by Democrats, and I'm not supposed to be saying what I'm saying. I am saying what I'm saying. And I'm saying it, by the way, in their face. You ought to see the kind of looks I get. You know, because I'm gonna say the truth, and I don't care who doesn't like it. They cannot come behind the arguments I'm making and say otherwise, so they seek the silencing treatment. That's why I'm not on Facebook anymore, because they took me off Facebook, but they couldn't answer what I was writing on Facebook. And all that did was make me, I have more time to do other things now. I haven't missed in the sweat. I'm not sweating it. I'm still doing other things with my time. But I will tell you that this is all a scam that's going on. We're being scammed by these politicians. This country is not great because of these politicians. This country is great because we had, for a period of time, the politicians under duress. We have them understanding that what Jefferson talked about, that when a government is fearful of the people, there's liberty. But when the people, which is what we had for a period of time, and probably to some extent have it now, but not as much as it was under Obama, people were afraid to even say Merry Christmas in this country. I kept hearing Happy Holidays because they were intimidated. We have people now saying Merry Christmas because some of that stress. You may have seen in the paper where they said that 1 person out of 3 in this country is stressed out in this country right now. America's not great because of these politicians. America's great because of the American people. And the idea was to keep these jokers, these politicians, under duress and under wraps, so that when you have liberty, that means then that government is fearful of the wrath of the people. When you have tyranny, it's the other way around. The people are fearful of their government. And that's what a stress is, by the way, in terms of people being stressed out because you're trying to pay for your Christmas right now. You're trying to make sure, after all those taxes that John was reading earlier, you're trying to make sure that after you paid you paid Peter, you paid Paul, you paid Peter again, and Paul came back, and you kept paying. You just hope you have enough in your check left so you can have a good Christmas for your children and buy them some toys and things of that sort, because they've taken their cut off the top.
I'd like to know this too. If the average salary of a congressman is what, $177,000 a year. After they get done of office, they often leave with what, millions of dollars in their bank account. So come on, that alone tells you whose benefit they're out there for. Okay, that alone will tell you.
Yes, well, you're not gonna drain anything. Trump is talking about draining the swamp. Are you kidding me? Take this for example. We have shown that what Robert Mueller is doing as a special investigator that is investigating collusion between the Trump administration and the Trump team and Russia. And they have been investigating this for a year and have found no collusion and have found no intent toward colluding with Russia by this administration. And yet the investigation continues to go forward, already having cost about what, $7 million? And the president that was elected by the American people November the 8th, 2016 cannot stop this investigation. What does that say? Why hasn't it been stopped? Because the House of Representatives control the purse strings. And why hasn't the House of Representatives cut the money off? Because if they don't finance Mueller, Mueller got to go home. Yet everybody in the country sees that there is no investigation going on right now that has anything to do with any impropriety on the part of this man who came through as president, and they didn't expect that, but they had a backup plan in case the impossible occurred, and that it did transpire. They had a backup plan to, in fact, circumvent that. And they've gone from one thing to another because they do not want to allow this election to stand And they had a backup plan. That's what they're meeting about behind closed doors right now in Washington. There's absolutely no reason to be meeting behind closed doors, because none of this that they're investigating right now with McCabe and Strzok having that conversation in McCabe's office, none of that is classified. That has nothing to do with national security information. So why is it behind closed doors when they had that testimony by McCabe in front of the House Intelligence Committee? And that's a word for you, House Intelligence Committee. What intelligence are we talking about there? What is that about? What language are we using here? The House Intelligence Committee. There's no intelligence in the House. There's no intelligence in the Senate and none in the Congress. If there was any intelligence, you think you would have a $20 trillion debt and them doing everything they can to hide what they're doing from the American people? That's not intelligence. That's corruption. These people are corrupt. And there's not going to be a change in it in terms of draining the swamp until we get smart enough to understand that we got to have term limits on these people. Or what Peter Schweiker talked about in his book called "Throw Them All Out." That's a solution. These people have got to be dealt with through the ballot box. And we've got to do that with some regularity. These guys up there 20 and 30 years, and Maxine Waters been up there 40 years, and look what we're doing. Look what these people are doing. They don't have respect for the American people, because if they did, they would not be up there talking about an overhaul. Or they would have done it this way. They would have cut the taxes. They would have had a tax break on the one side, and then they would have lowered the cost of government on the other side, meaning some folks got to go home. You got 2 million persons working in the federal government right now. We have the largest central government in the world right now in this country. And we started out as a federal government of limited means and limited we had 4 departments when government was first set up. We now got 16 departments. 16 executive departments.
Now, people are under the impression that the Department of Education is such a necessary and integral thing for the United States to have. You were an educator. You could tell. You remember when we didn't have a federal, Department of Education. They came out in the 70s after Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter in '78.
Yeah. So I mean, and look at the emphasis on education, the money, the spending, and all that has been, I think, from what I've seen, has been misspent. And yet people would try to really argue that you would have to still maintain this department, which I think clearly shows it's been a failure, but they'll still adamantly defend it and support it and say we can't cut it. And it's a drain.
It is a drain. John, the federal government was never intended to be involved in education. Education is a state responsibility. But by the government creeping into the area of education because they want to control what people learn and what people know, because information is where power is located. Information is, how they say knowledge is power? Well, knowledge is really consciousness. And then consciousness, being aware, is power. So they control the information flow by getting involved in it. How do they do that? They do it by, in fact, controlling the test. If they can control what they're testing you on, then they control what's being taught. And I can guarantee you right now, they're not teaching anything about James Madison, because they're not testing on James Madison or Thomas Jefferson. Those names don't even come up, because they're trying to get away from that. And Merry Christmas, that was another part of the attack upon the country and upon its traditions. Because we have a Judeo-Christian tradition in this country, and they're trying to change that. That's an overhaul also, isn't it? They said they had a tax overhaul. Well, they have an overhaul of the rest of the stuff as well. And they're hauling us over where? They're hauling us over across our own boundary lines, and they're hauling us over to the globalist lands. I don't know if you noticed this or not in terms of this thing that's going on right now in the United Nations. They're talking about they're going to take a vote because Donald Trump has decided to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And so now nations in the UN are going to have a vote to censor that move on the part of the federal government. And whether you agree with it or not, based upon some claims you have, religious claim that you have or not, the fact of the matter is a sovereign nation has the right to make up its mind what it's going to do as far as that issue is concerned. But they're telling us that they are getting ready to take a vote upon censoring the United States for making that move.
Well, see, as much as I oppose it myself, because I mean, I think it's going to just agitate things, but let's face it, the center for power for the people of Israel is in Jerusalem and always has been, or has, for so many years. So Tel Aviv was just basically an appeasement that basically wasn't. It's just a smokescreen. It was stupid. So I mean, as much as I disagree with it, the power for the Israeli people was in Jerusalem anyway.
Yes.
That's where their offices are at.
Well, you see that this is not the president now that's going to back down from a good fight. This president said now that if those countries do that, he is watching every country that would take a vote against the action of the United States as a sovereign nation, and they will be held to account for that vote. In other words, it won't be without some consequence. Because you cannot dictate to a country how it is to control its own internal affairs. Every nation is sovereign. And Donald Trump was right in saying that he wants to be for America and put America first, and then he expects every other country to put their nation first as well. But you see, that's an anti-globalist intent. And the intent here was a globalist intent. That's what Merry Christmas was about in terms of you not being able to say that for the last 8 years, where they had canceled that out.
Do you think, though, that Trump really anticipated, really saw what was going on, the agenda? Do you think he really saw that? Or because he was so much caught up in being an American and so much, he liked the wealth he helped create and stuff, that he didn't realize whose toes he was stepping on? Because he's going to infuriate probably 90% of the elite in this world. And I don't know if he anticipated that. I mean, he's a smart man. Maybe he did. Maybe he knew what he was stepping into. But I think
Trump knows that in terms of putting America first, he knew he was putting daggers in the back of these people that were in fact hijacking this country and running it against his own self-interest into the globalist net. This fundamental transformation of this nation was what was going on in this country, and Donald Trump's put America first was an objection to that direction this country was going in. He was very, very much aware of it. And so were those that went to the polls and voted for this outsider, because if Donald Trump had any other agenda, he would not be president of the United States right now. In fact, his base is what they're doing right now, because when I say Democratic Party, I'm also talking about the media. Because the Democratic Party, the media, I'm repeating myself, it's the same thing. The media in this country is a Democratic Party. And they're trying to act like this tax overhaul, is unpopular. You know why the polls indicate it's unpopular? If you give people their money back, if you give people some money that they didn't have and give back to them, you think people object to that? And the poll is saying that this tax is unpopular. And you know why? Because it went out there and sampled Democrats. CNN, that was you. MSNBC, that was you. NBC, CBS, ABC, you all go out there and poll Democrats. And of course, Democrats don't like the party that's in power, because the Democrats want to be in power themselves. So they object to the tax overhaul. But they would object to it no matter what would have occurred, because they want to, in fact, have an issue to run on in 2018. And they're celebrating at the chomping at the bit right now, because they had this victory down in Alabama. Roy Moore was defeated, and Doug Jones became the, I don't know if that's going to really play out in the end, because Roy Moore has not conceded yet. I think the last report is he had not conceded. And based on what I've been getting from reports about what happened down there, he shouldn't concede, because I'm not so sure that election was without its own undercurrents, its own flaws. Because these elections in this country sometimes now don't go according to the will of the voters, and many times it does not. Because we are not any different in many ways of other countries as far as its political elite is concerned. Our greatness is the character of the American people. It is not great because of the politicians, and we have to learn that. And when I call them out because I know who they are. I know who they are in history, and I know who they are and what they have to be, because they're not producers. I learned that from reading Ayn Rand's books about Atlas Shrugged and so on. The fact that they're not producers, therefore they're parasites. That's who politicians are. And there are no exceptions to that rule. So they had a tax overhaul, and they overhauled the tax and they hauled it over to your children. Don't forget that. And when we have the midterms, let's keep in mind that those that are up there, that have been in there years and years and years, it's time for us to start flexing our muscles in terms of our own power out here. Okay, we got to get out of here. I want you to have a great, Merry Christmas and a wonderful New Year coming in 2018. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.